Every whiskey begins long before it ever sees a barrel. Before there's color, aroma, or age, there's a recipe. It's called a mash bill. The mash bill is the foundation of the spirit, a mix of grains that determines its sweetness, spice, texture, and balance. Corn brings smoothness and warmth. Rye adds a little fire, that sharp, peppery edge. Barley gives structure, while the wheat softens everything, rounding it out into something that is easy to enjoy. Each master distiller guards their mash bill like a secret. It's not just what goes in, but how it all comes together. Even a small change, just a few percentage points, can completely alter the flavor, the feel, and even the personality of the whiskey. And it's never a one-time decision. Every batch requires attention, adjustment, and care. The master distiller chooses intentionally, sourcing each grain with purpose, knowing how it will shape what comes next. Because they're not just making whiskey, they're crafting character. They start with the end in mind, the flavor they want, the story they want the spirit to tell, and they build backward from there. And in life, it's the same. Each of us is blending something: experience, passion, purpose, and calling into our own mix. We're constantly adjusting and refining, learning how those ingredients shape the person we're becoming. Because the mix that makes you, your mash, determines not only what you create, but who you are in the process. That's the real art of significance, and that's where clarity begins. As we learned in the opening, every great whiskey starts with its mash bill, the intentional blend of grains that defines what it will become. The same way a distiller chooses each grain with intention, a leader shapes their team with purpose, not by accident or convenience, but by design. When we think about building teams, we often focus on skills, experience, credentials, talent. All are necessary, but not enough. Great teams are not just a list of ingredients. They're a blend, a balance of people, personalities, and perspective that together create something with depth and character. The leader's job isn't just to fill positions. It's to craft alignment, just like a master distiller who's crafting a purposeful whiskey. Some leaders have the gift of starting from scratch, shaping their team, vision, and culture from the ground up. Others step into something that's already in motion, where the ingredients don't all come from the same source. This is where leadership becomes art. Because great leaders don't just accept what they're given, they refine it. They work with what's in front of them while shaping what comes next. They nurture what still has value, remove what no longer fits, and begin blending something that is true to the mission ahead. Some people bring sweetness. They create stability and warmth. Others bring the spice. They challenge, stretch, and add energy. You need both. Too much sweetness and you lose your edge. Too much spice and the team burns out. The magic happens in the balance. That's where great teams and great whiskey find their character, their purpose, and make a true impact. And that's a kind of balance that doesn't happen just once. It has to be nurtured, checked, and refined over time. That's where the real craft comes in. And that's where we start thinking like a master distiller. A master distiller doesn't chase perfection. They chase purpose. They study the ingredients, the process, and the chemistry of how things work together. Every day, they test and measure and adjust. They stay close to the process and they trust their senses. Leadership and life work the same way. Once the mix is in motion, the work isn't finished. It's actually just beginning. Every project, every challenge, every unexpected result gives you critical feedback. The real craft of leadership is learning to stay present in the process, to lead from awareness, not assumption, to sense when something is off before it becomes a crisis, and to know when to hold steady and know when to change course. Refinement isn't about control. It's about curiosity. That's what separates managers from master distillers. Managers follow instructions, but master distillers and great leaders, they read the room, they trust their instincts, and they refine as they go. It's about having the courage to keep learning from what the blend is teaching you. And if you think about it, that's the real secret of mastery. It's not about fixing the mix. It's about understanding it. So let's take a closer look at what that means, not just for our teams, but for ourselves. Every master distiller knows the secret isn't just in the ingredients. It's how they understand them. Corn, rye, barley, wheat, each bring something different to the table. Some add sweetness, others bring heat, others bring structure. Alone, they're just ordinary ingredients, but together, in the right proportions, they become something truly remarkable. That's the art. A distiller studies each grain, each reaction, each detail, until they fully understand what every element contributes and how it behaves in the mix. They're not guessing. They're designing, blending with purpose. And in leadership and in life, it's the same. We all have a personal mash that's made up of ingredients that define what we can create. For a leader, it might be people, resources, could be systems, processes. But for all of us, it's our experiences, stories, strengths, skills, convictions. The goal isn't to make what we have work for us, but to create the right mix of what is uniquely ours. That blend that helps us craft what is great and aligned with what we're called to build. When you start thinking like a master distiller, your focus shifts from what's missing to what's distinctive. You start designing with purpose, not to copy someone else's recipe, but to craft the one only you were meant to create. Because like every great whiskey out there, what makes it valuable isn't its perfection, it's its character. So here are 3 steps to think like a master distiller. 1. Know your ingredients. Take inventory of what's already in your mix, the people, experiences, the opportunities that define your season. Each one brings something to the table. The distiller's genius begins with understanding, not judgment. Number 2, you blend for the outcome. A great whiskey starts with the end in mind, the flavor it's meant to express. In the same way, align your mix to your mission. Adjust proportions, shift energy, or focus your time based on where you're called to go, not where you've been. And the third, keep tasting, keep learning. A master distiller never assumes the recipe is done. They taste, they tweak, and they refine every batch. Stay engaged with your mix. Pay attention to what's working, what needs balance, or what flavor is emerging. Because mastery isn't found in perfection. It's found in awareness. And that awareness turns what you have into something intentional, purposeful, and distinctly yours. And here's where it gets personal. Because the mash that we've been talking about isn't just about leadership or teams. It's about you, your mix, your recipe, and your purpose. When your mix falls out of balance, you can feel it. Work starts to lose its connection to its purpose. The things that once fueled you now begin to drain you. And what used to feel like passion, it starts to feel like pressure. But like the distiller, you can always return to the recipe. You can pause, taste, and rebalance. Sometimes the ingredients aren't wrong. They're just out of balance. The process that brings clarity to your mix will always bring clarity to you. When your blend aligns with your purpose, everything you touch begins to reflect it. Your work, your relationships, even your rest. It's no longer about success. It's about significance. And when you understand your mix, you stop trying to perfect others and allowing the process to perfect you. And that's where clarity deepens. When what you're creating on the outside finally matches with who you're becoming on the inside. And that idea, creating something that truly reflects who you are, well, that reminds me of one of my favorite stories in whiskey. It's about two friends who did exactly just that. Back in 2012, two longtime friends, Dr. Pat Heist and Shane Baker, decided to start something new in the heart of Kentucky. At the time, they weren't master distillers. They were scientists and engineers running a research company that helped other distilleries improve their fermentation and flavor consistency. But after years of studying everyone else's process, they started to feel something was missing. They had the knowledge, they had the experience, they had the curiosity, but they didn't have the creation. They were surrounded by data on what made whiskey work, but they hadn't yet discovered what made it theirs. So they did what any great distiller would do. They took everything that they learned and started crafting their own. They created Wilderness Trail Distillery, building it around a slower, riskier process called sweet mash fermentation. Instead of using the industry's standard sour mash, they started fresh with every batch, protecting purity and flavor at the cost of efficiency. It wasn't the easy way, but it was the right way for them. And it became their signature, their own unique blend of science, patience, and purpose. They didn't try to copy anyone else. They trusted their process. And today, Wilderness Trail is known as one of the most intentional, authentic whiskeys in Kentucky, one that carries their fingerprints in every pour. And that's what happens when you stop perfecting someone else's recipe and start crafting your own. When you blend what you know with what you believe, you create something that is unmistakably yours. And that brings us right back to where we started, the tasting table. Because clarity, like whiskey, is meant to be savored. If you've ever been to a whiskey tasting, you know it's not just about the drink. It's about the experience. You swirl, breathe, taste, and pause. You notice the texture, the warmth, the finish. You take your time. That's how we should approach our own mix, with the same patience, presence, and curiosity. Every distiller approaches their craft this way, with awareness of what's in front of them and respect for what it's becoming. And that's our job too, to become students of our own mash. So ask yourself, what ingredients am I working with right now? The people, the projects, the passions that are making up this season. Am I blending them towards what I'm called to create? Are my choices and priorities aligned with the outcome I truly want to see? How often am I tasting and refining? Do I pause long enough to notice what's working and what's missing and what needs more balance? When you start to think like a distiller, clarity stops being something that you chase and becomes something that you craft. You learn to trust your process, your purpose, and your palate. And over time, what you create in your work and in your life starts to carry your signature. That's where character is formed. That's where purpose becomes proof. If this episode helped you see your own blend a little differently, share it with someone who is still trying to find theirs. You can listen to past episodes or subscribe at craftedclarity.net. And remember, clarity isn't found, it's crafted. Thanks for listening to Crafted Clarity. If you're a leader wrestling with the tension between success and significance, or you're trying to align your work with a deeper calling, I'd love to connect with you. If your organization is facing questions about strategy, whether it's alignment, ROI, or building confidence in your team, this is the work we do every day at iBrand. And if you walk this journey yourself, or maybe you're right in the middle of it, I'd love to hear your story and maybe even share it here on the podcast. You can find me at craftedclarity.net.